whole new global talk show, Newstellers. Let's meet our panel. So 22 years after the closure of the original Jurassic Park, a new theme park full of genetically modified dinosaurs is built on the island of Isla Nublar.
A whole new frontier has opened up. We have our first genetically modified hybrid.
But the park is plunged into chaos when the new hybrid clone dinosaur, the Indominus Rex, breaks loose and goes on a killing spree. So the events in Jurassic World, obviously, it's a fictional movie, but we can actually already see the products of cloning to some extent in reality today, is that right?
Yeah, we didn't clone still these kind of extinct animals, but these days a lot of laboratories are cloning different animals. They are getting some success at some point cloning animals. I think it's going to be good for the development of science, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
they clone dogs, we can clone cows or any kind of, a lot of animals actually. And some scientists are now trying, I guess we'll talk more about it, but are trying to clone extinct animals too.
Yeah, actually the process in Jurassic Park where they take insects that are preserved in resin has actually been attempted in real life. In 2013, a group of scientists at the University of Manchester actually tried to do a similar experiment with some bees to see if they could extract resin, but they weren't successful. So for now, it seems that the sort of plot line from Jurassic Park isn't going to be a reality, but it is something they're actually trying to do in real life.
Please don't clone any mosquitoes.
Please don't, we have enough of those
I don't think there's a
already.
need to clone mosquitoes. They are everywhere.
So far it's still a technology in development and it's mainly depicted in movies and books still. So let's get into today's topic, shall we? We've got quite a dramatic title. It's Thousands of Me's, the World of Clones. So going back to the beginning then, we started off with animal cloning, I believe. When was the first instance of animal cloning and what was the purpose behind it?
Well, actually, a lot of people think that cloning is something like from the 2 decades ago, but it goes like much farther. It goes to the 1952.
Really?
when some Americans started to make some experiments about cloning. They started to make these first experiments with the cells, right?
Yeah, the first animal cloned was actually a tadpole in 1952, so it's maybe not as recent as we think. It started off at a very low level with sort of simple animals, I suppose, and then it developed from there.
Actually, it was easy because they use the nucleus from some embryo that then transplant it in an ovocyte of another animal. But the real breakthrough was in '96 when they cloned Dolly the sheep.
Oh, yes.
Because
I remember
for
it was
Dolly the
all
sheep,
over the news.
they use cell from other part of the body. It was not embryonic cells, and it was the first mammal to be cloned. So that was much more difficult.
Right.
Well, and the interesting thing about Dolly, I also thought, was that Dolly was taken, the cell was taken from an adult. It wasn't taken from the initial stages. Yeah.
So what are the general purposes of animal cloning in the modern world today?
One fascinating story I read about was China is actually one of the leaders in the field of animal cloning. There's a company in China called BGI, and they clone about 500 pigs every single year,
Oh, wow.
mainly for use for drug testing.
What's interesting with animal cloning is you can take an animal with a very good, desirable genetic makeup and just reproduce him exactly. So for example, in Korea, we see a lot of police dogs being cloned because to train a police dog, it costs a lot of money.
Right.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the innate ability of the dog. So if you clone a dog that you know is a good police dog, then you can save a lot of time and money.
So it's like a more efficient way of selective breeding.
Exactly.
So what kind of news stories about animal or other cloning have we seen across the globe so far?
Well, I read recently about a 15-year-old goat in China, which is the oldest cloned goat in the world. What was interesting for me was it brought up that whole debate about the effects of cloning and how healthy it is for the animal. So according to the scientists in the article, this goat's health was not great because it was in advanced years for a goat,
Right.
but was actually quite comparable to a normal goat. So at least in this case, that seemed to sort of put to rest some of the fears that we saw around Dolly and so on.
Okay.
Well, there was an interesting case in November of last year in the UK where people were paying 60,000 British pounds to clone their dog. And the idea was like that their dog was going to die and they were going to miss, they really liked their dog and they were going to miss it once it died. So they were paying this company a lot of money to like create another one for them. But when I read about this, a lot of scientific experts said that it was pointless because even if the dog has the same cellular makeup, it's not going to be the same animal. It's going to have a different personality. It's going to have different emotions. And these people who were cloning their dogs as a way of like warding off death were just setting themselves up for disappointment.
Yeah, I have a story that called my attention because we were talking before about cloning extinct animals, and the human being, I don't know, we always had like that kind of fascination about dinosaurs and stuff. And one of the animals that caused a lot of fascination is the mammoth. And we have still some parts of mammoths, like they were conserved, like hair and stuff. So some American scientists tried a couple of years ago to clone mammoths. They put the nucleus of the egg in some elephant's egg. They couldn't make it still, but they are trying to clone this fascinating elephant with hair called mammoth.
I'm sorry to bring my own articles, but I just published one a couple of days ago about Hwang Woo-seok, this very infamous Korean scientist who now set up his own company here in Seoul, and they're specialized in cloning pet dogs. And they clone around 100 dogs a year for very rich customers who want to have somehow, as Steven said, resuscitate their deceased animal. And what was interesting is that we all know that the problem Hwang Woo-seok faced and this fraud accusation, and now they're trying to be very transparent, so they kind of welcome journalists. So you can see how they work, you can even see some live operation. It was kind of a very impressive visit.
So more transparency came out of a very
superficially
controversial.
transparent, I would say.
So we've dealt with animal cloning so far, but there was a recent experiment that showed a close link between animal clones and humans. In 2014, a research team at Konkuk University, led by Professor Kim Jin-hwae of the College of Animal Bioscience and Technology and the University of Missouri, jointly succeeded in producing the first animal with a severe combined immune deficiency phenotype, meaning that we now have clone pigs that are able to receive transplantation of human organs without the risk of rejection. The research results overcome the disparity between the human immune system and that of pigs, thus are expected to be applied to stem cell treatment for patients with incurable diseases. So these transgenic pigs were created for a specific reason, to save human lives. Is this something that you agree with?
A lot of people are dying every year because they need urgently organ transplantation and they're on a waiting list and there is just not enough organs. So if we could find a solution like this, we could indeed save a lot of lives.
I think when it comes to things like makeup or food, animal rights activists are always going to have quite a compelling argument about not treating them badly just for human use. But I think when it comes to saving human lives, that argument is going to win every time. I think the majority of the public in any country is going to say people come first. And I think it's going to be very hard for opponents of that to argue convincingly that the rights of animals should take precedence over human health and even their lives.
Especially with all the long waiting lists.
Yeah.
Well, there is there is an obvious, I think, moral dilemma. Like if you're creating an animal, like you're creating a life, and its only purpose is to like it has no purpose to live on its own terms. It's just being created for something else. But I mean, I guess we'd have to say there are chickens that are created just to lay eggs. There are cows that are just to give milk.
I think that's a compelling argument when you talk about people, but I'd be very surprised if most people would extend that the whole way to animals, because I think most people think people are more important than animals.
Okay, but do they deserve to be brought to life, in a sense, just to serve human needs?
For a long time, we've been literally, the word breeding, we've been breeding and creating animals. I mean, it's of course it's not the same as cloning and engineering animals in the same way, but we've been treating animals as things that exist to fill human need for a very long time.
I think the only morally consistent way to be very obviously against this is if you're, vegan, if you don't eat meat and animal products.
Yeah.
But for the moment, that's very much a minority position in everywhere. So until such time as people decide to stop eating meat and eating animal products, I think it's going to be hard to object to using animals for our own devices in other important ways.
And also the cloning of animals in the future, when cloning comes to be like something easier and something cheaper, cloning animals will be just for the meat or for the milk of the cows. So I think that would be good too. We will be able to raise like really healthy and delicious cows and pigs.
That's actually already happening.
For our human consumption. And it will be the same thing of reproducing them naturally. It will be like cloning them. What's the different ethical issue? We are still killing animals, eating animals. So I think it will be like a good development that probably some vegans would reject, but most of the people like to eat animals. So I don't think there will be any issue with that, and that will be part of our food in the future.
That's actually a reality today. The Chinese company I mentioned earlier that clones pigs on a huge scale, actually part of their work is testing what the most delicious meat is and what the most delicious products are, and that's literally one of their areas of research, which might seem more trivial, but that's something they're interested in. And actually in the United States, the FTA, which regulates food and drugs, has already approved food products from cloned animals, and in their opinion at least, there's no difference between the two types of food.
Yeah, but European Union bans it, and there is very good reason for that. I disagree with you. The problem is if you clone the same animal, you have a lack of diversity. And if there is one disease, one single virus could kill all the animals because they're all the same. So the advantage of diversity, you have more resilient animal population. I think cows that are bred naturally are still good. I don't necessarily see the point of cloning animals for meat consumption. I kind of disagree with you on that.
The issue of animal cloning for human use raises a lot of concerns, but the consensus seems to be that this seems to be happening anyway, and seemingly human cloning may follow shortly afterwards. How far has the science developed so far?
I think the science didn't develop as far as being ready to do human cloning now. Probably there would be a lot of problems. If we try to clone a human at this point, scientists say that it can fail. There's a big possibility that it can fail, and that goes beyond ethics. So if you clone a human being now, maybe he can die as a baby or with 10 years old, or he can develop some weird disease. So that's why now most of the countries, and probably all the countries, ban human cloning.
But when I visited Swan Biotech, the Huang Wusok Scientific Research Institute, they told me that technically it's easier to clone a human than a dog because we have so many information. We have so much knowledge about the human reproductive system that it would be easier to clone human than a dog.
So bringing someone back to life. It sounds like science fiction still, but some people are actually trying to make this happen today. Canadian dentist Dr. Michael Zook has hit the headlines with his plan to clone Beatles singer John Lennon. In an interview with the UK's Channel 4, the dentist revealed how he bought one of Lennon's teeth for $33,000 at auction. He said that it could be used to extract DNA to produce a Lennon clone, whom he plans to raise to make another music legend. What was your reaction to this?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny in some way because first he's a dentist, so it's like a little bit weird that a dentist just collects a tooth of John Lennon and he wants to. And the other way is that he looks like very naive in the way of saying like, oh, I'm gonna clone John Lennon, but I'm gonna keep him out of alcohol and cigarettes. So it's kind of funny, but I don't know if he will be able to make it in the future. And actually, I would like to see how it goes.
Okay.
I think there's a misunderstanding. Even if you clone a person, like if he is brought up in a different environment, then obviously will become a different person.
Exactly. I mean, I'm a massive Beatles fan, so as much as I'd like to see this happen, the story of the Beatles is all about where they grew up, who they met, who they played with, and you can't just put something in a test tube and like shake it up and oh, well, he's going to become the next John Lennon again. It just wouldn't work that way. And, that's before you get to the question of, is it fair just to bring someone into the world to fulfill your musical dreams?
And knowing John Lennon, maybe he would hate that people play with his DNA. I don't think even John Lennon would accept that some dentist decide to recreate him.
Yeah, probably he doesn't have opinion anymore, I guess. But but well, in some way, probably it can be like a very talented person in music. That's what that guy wants, right? I mean, probably it's not going to be the same John Lennon. I mean, we are in different times and different environment. But probably this clone of John Lennon would be very talented in music, and with the adequate knowledge, probably he can be a very good music star that provides the world with new amazing
But
songs.
he might want to become a plumber or a dentist.
Yeah, what if he grew up and he had no
maybe.
interest
He
in
might
music
become a
and like
firefighter.
we have to consider we can't just say about cloning like, well, if that guy wants to do it, that's his choice. We have to consider like this person that he's going to be creating and like how they're going to feel about it. Like maybe this guy will have no interest in music and he's born, he's like, yo, I don't like music. I want to paint. I want to play soccer.
So probably his creator would say like, okay, just play soccer if you want. I mean,
I don't know.
What's the problem?
Maybe he would feel really invested. And like,
Is it like, you owe me that,
so,
right?
yeah, some
No,
parents
of course not.
kind of feel like, well, I invested you in my kids. So like now you have to fulfill the profession that I want.
He's already
for
paid
you.
that's $3,000 just for a tooth, so.
Yeah. But how many parents do have like those crazy expectations about their children and they ruin their children's talents and lives without cloning?
But that's different.
Thousands all over the world.
You
In
say,
that case,
Ata, you say
it
he's
can-
creator, and I think these words are interesting. People play God. People try to play God. They want to resuscitate deceased people, and I think that's very, very worrisome.
Yeah, that's what 300 years ago people say the same thing about science. You are playing God, don't do that. God is taking care of everything. Don't develop science. That's it. But I think that's a human development that is impossible to stop. Some religious people, some conservative people will try to stop it. But finally, it will go through because it's another human development. It's another science development.
So you guys seem to think that this is going to become inevitable, human cloning. And with all the ethical concerns that we've talked about, it seems like there needs to be some really robust legal frameworks in place. So what kind of frameworks are in place at the moment?
Well, there is a robust legal framework in place in Canada, where I'm from. Cloning of humans is, of course, illegal. Cloning of use of stem cells is also illegal. And when these cases have been brought to court, the people who object to them often cite that cloning and allowing cloning technologies to proliferate poses a serious challenge and poses a threat to human dignity.
I was interested to learn that UNESCO actually made a very strong declaration against human cloning in 1997.
Okay.
And they used the very same terminology actually as Stephen, human dignity. They said it was an affront to the concept of individual personhood and so forth. So there seems to be a relatively robust consensus that's at very least very cautious about this. One of the most interesting legal jurisdictions, I think, is the United States. It's the most important country in the world in so many fields, but they actually don't have a federal law against human cloning outright. They have different regulations in different states. And when we consider how advanced, the US is in science and medicine and so forth, that's going to be a very interesting place to look at in the years to come.
My country, France, has one of the strictest laws in the world where reproductive human cloning is strictly prohibited, and I think you can get up to 30 years of jail if you do research in human reproductive cloning.
Even research?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in Spain, reproductive cloning is totally banned too. You can go to jail. But therapeutic cloning is allowed in some cases. Basically, it's as long as you don't waste embryos, you can do research on therapeutic cloning to cure diseases or to make transplants easier. So the law in Spain has those two sides.
And back to what John was saying, I have to say that in terms of animal cloning, compared to the US, European Union has pretty strict laws too, where it's forbidden to clone farm animal for meat consumption, and it's forbidden to import cloned animals too.
Oh, is that so? Yeah. And in Korea, I mean, we know animal cloning takes place. How far is human cloning come
I think
along?
it's strictly forbidden too.
In the year 2013, I think they passed the bioethical and safety law. In the case of cloning animals, there is an ethical regulation board that manages it. But the cloning of animals for research purposes is allowed, as long as we follow the guideline that has been established by the government. But human cloning is forbidden, and the cloning of stem cells for therapeutical uses is allowed, but very limited.
All right. So where do you see cloning technology going in the future? Is it going to become the next cutting-edge 21st century technology?
It will go slower than other technologies because that's what we are seeing in the past. I mean, Dolly was created already 20 years ago, and since then we didn't see any landmark as big as that creation of Dolly. So I think it will go slower, but step by step it's going to normalize, and it's going to be just part of our lives, as many things in science has become part of our daily lives in the last centuries.
It's hard to predict, how far it will go, but I think the further we take this, it's going to become a case of actually redefining our very humanity, and you're going to have all sorts of tangents that we can't even imagine now, where you're going to have science to deal with the consequences of the science that we're still sort of figuring out. So, once you redefine what it means to be human in a very fundamental way, we really don't know where the consequences will end, both positive or negative.
I think the motivation for cloning, it all comes back to humankind's fear of death. We've never been able to reconcile the idea that all of our lives end. I think that's where a lot of religious theology comes from. And so as long as we maintain, a poorly evolved mammalian species ourselves, and we have this fear of our lives ending, we're always going to look to science and technology as ways of allaying that fear and maybe making us feel like our lives or the lives of people around us are somehow renewable, but they really aren't.
So it seems like there needs to be some really robust ethical and legal, and there are still technological barriers, I think, to cloning, but it looks like it is becoming an inevitable reality. So let's hope all those problems can be smoothed out so it can become a safe and effective contribution to society. All right, well, as usual, let's wrap up with our final headlines on today's topic. Stephen, would you like to go first?
My headline would be, cloning shows us that playing God is a dangerous game.
Fred.
My headline would be, let's not forget to protect human dignity.
Okay.
I would say cloning the new progress of science for the human being.
I would say we should think before we leap.
All right, thank you so much for your really interesting insights on a fascinating and dividing topic, I think, still. And join us next week, viewers, for a whole new global talk show, Newstellers. We will be open for any opinions or requests on our official website as well as our Facebook page. Mainly depicted in movies and books.
Brave New World, I think, is a big one, which people don't breed naturally, and basically there's a caste system and people are created as clones.
Star Wars, the attack of the clone, the future emperor will build a full army from one guy.
Really made a strong impression on me as a kid was Frankenstein. If it can act autonomously, it might not follow the directions that the person who created it.
Blade Runner is a really amazing story about how clones and humans can interact.